Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Today is Season 6, Episode 11, and we are talking about interior offensive line. The Steelers obviously need a center, with B.J. Finney and J.C. Hassenauer being their two centers on the roster right now after the retirement of Marquise Pouncey. So center is very important, and there's a very good argument for guard depth. You have Kevin Dotson, who's definitely a good starter. You have David DeCastro, who's come down a bit from when he was an All-Pro, but I mean, he is still more than a serviceable starter and not looking to be replaced, at least not yet. However, the depth behind them is not good. You're assuming a center is drafted, so maybe B.J. Finney is not the starter. So you have B.J. Finney as a good guard center backup option who has experience, but you don't even know if you really want to roll with that. You kind of need more than that. So guard is an option as well in the draft. That being said, I have two guards today and three centers, as I view the center as more important this year, because basically they need to draft one. Watch now, they'll absolutely won't draft a center, but anyway, let's hop right into it and start with my first prospect, and that's Landon Dickerson. He is a center from Alabama. He's 6'6" and 333 pounds. Coming out of high school in Carolina, he was a four-star recruit as an offensive tackle prospect, being ranked the fifth best offensive tackle in the nation and the third best player in North Carolina. With his size, he was highly sought after with offers from Clemson, Georgia, Tennessee, UNC, and Florida. However, Dickerson chose FSU as his school of choice. He switched to guard and became the first true freshman offensive lineman to start for FSU since 1982. He started the first 7 games of the season, but it came to an abrupt end after a torn ACL ended his season. In 2017, he started the first 4 games at the left guard spot, but then suffered an ankle injury that halted his season. Going into 2019, he was a starting tackle, but after only 1 game, an ankle injury knocked him out for the season yet again. Following the season, Dickerson entered the transfer portal and joined the Crimson Tide. For 2019, he finally got to play in all 13 of the team's games with 4 starts at right guard and 9 at center to go on to be named a second-team All-Conference player. In 2020, he played out of his mind to be named a first-team All-Conference selection, Associated Press All-American, the Remington Trophy winner for Best Center in the Nation, and was co-winner of the Jacobs Blocking Trophy with teammate Alex Leatherwood after he started the first 11 games of the season. Emphasis on first, though, as he suffered a knee injury in the SEC Championship that required surgery, and while not actually gameplay ready, he got back on the field for the team's national championship game to do the final snap in victory formation. Following his redshirt senior season, he declared for the draft. So, starting with his positives, it's an odd place to start, but I saw him tackle Nick Bolton on a turnover, and it was a really great tackle. And I just wanted to point that out. I don't really... It's probably not something that will go forward at the NFL level, but I did want to say that he had a nice tackle to stop a guy on a turnover. And he's that kind of high effort and motor player where he's going to do that. He was excellent on double team blocks. Him and his teammates were driving people out of the stadium that way. Honestly, you just had to give up. If it was a double team block and Dickerson was involved, there was nothing you could do. Because, I mean, you're talking about Alabama's the best offensive line in the nation, and you're talking about the best center in the nation, helping out one of the best offensive linemen in the nation, and it was just tough. And don't get me wrong, though, he was able to drive back quite a few guys on tape on his own. He could handle most people. I mean, he didn't... I say most, but there's really no one he couldn't handle. He was a very, very good center from the get-go, and doesn't need to be a double team blocker to be successful. He could handle guys one-on-one very well. He makes initial contact almost always. That was something I liked on tape. I thought that he was the guy getting the hands on his opponent first, more than often than not. Not always. It was just... But, like, most of the time. I would definitely say, like, maybe 75% of the time he was doing it. Then he has pretty solid arm length for a center. He has longer arms than guys like Travis Frederick, Alex Mack, Jason Kelsey, Marquise Pouncey, Rodney Hudson, and more. I looked that up because I was like, some people were saying that his arm length was kind of below average, but I was like, he seems okay. Like, I thought that his arm length was adequate at the very least, but he had longer arms than those guys that at some point were very good, and some are still very good, but I wanted to point that out because I didn't view it as a negative. It was something I was watching on his tape, and I was like, I didn't think his arms were that short. But regardless, he didn't have an inaccurate snap on tape that I saw, so I appreciated that. I thought that he was very good and accurate with the snaps. Then he's an overwhelming blocker for anyone once he got speed. He knocked quite a few guys over that way. Once he got speed, it was over. Again, it was like double team blocks, but essentially he used his momentum to absolutely run over people. And he was fairly athletic. I'm not going to say the most athletic, but fairly athletic enough where he could get enough speed and space. He has excellent grip strength for sustainability. I thought that he did really well sustaining blocks. Didn't really have to at Alabama because he got the ball out pretty quick, but still. Then he has strong punch to really knock a guy around. He has strength. When I say he handled guys one-on-one, he has the strength to do so. He is very, very impressive. Then he has good recognition to move from target to target, going to the more dangerous guy. He had a really, really great play where he was blocking his guy, and then I think Alex Leatherwood lost control of his guy, and he went around Dickerson and his man, and Dickerson pushed his man to the ground and just got enough to stop Mac Jones from getting sacked from Alex Leatherwood's guy who moved inside. He's very good, and he has good lateral movement to do stuff like that. He's I wouldn't say it's the best, but I mean, honestly, I was very happy with his lateral movement. So going to the negatives, I really hated his guard tape. It was pretty bad, with multiple problems coming up, including but not limited to sluggish pulling, a weird thing where he looked back and sold when the snap was happening. It was bizarre. It reminded me of one of my other prospects who got moved to center in an impromptu situation and was looking back to make sure he was going to get the snap right, but he was doing it at guard, and then he, like, from the guard position, and he's like looking back, and then he'd look forward, and then they'd snap the ball. It's like giving the defense a telltale sign that, oh yeah, this team is going to snap the ball. I don't know what was up with that. He was slow at the snap. He missed some blocks in space, etc. This was in 2019, but I don't believe he will have much positional versatility at the NFL level from what I saw from his guard tape. I mean, he also played tackle for one game. I don't know if he would be a good fit for tackle either. His calling is 100% at center. 100%. He really shouldn't be moved. If a team is moving them, I think they're making a complete mistake. Now, I kind of avoided it first because I thought it would be overplayed, but I do have to touch on it. It is the biggest concern with Landon Dickerson is that his injury history. The injury history is tough. He has torn ACL, several season-ending injuries, and he's coming off one where he wasn't even ready for his pro day, and we don't know when he will exactly be ready. So we don't know. And I mean, with all these injuries, when do they stop? Is this injury going to be the one that pushed him over and he's not going to be as good anymore? It's a tough call. It really is. It's a guy that only had one full season. One full season with Alabama now 2 years ago, back in 2019. I guess a year and a half. But regardless, it is going to be the biggest thing with him, and it might take him off some draft boards. The injury history is tough. He's got a lot, and I mean, he was playing with 2 braces on his knees. He is a question mark in that regard. I mean, you really, it's some of it's luckiness. Like, you really have to he could go on and never get hurt ever again in his career. But then again, he could just keep getting hurt and never play another snap of football. We don't know. It is going to be the biggest downfall to Landon Dickerson, and it's kind of out of his control. Then he could be faster to find some work at times. I felt like there were some times where he was just kind of sitting there. Partially that could be a good thing because he's just looking for incoming blitzers, but I felt like even times there was pretty obvious situations where there wasn't blitzers in front of him where he could have gotten over and helped his guys a little bit faster. Then he stops driving his feet sometimes when he's blocking. I think it's important for linemen to keep moving their feet, just trying to keep mirror, trying to keep pushing. I felt like at times he did stop driving. Then he wasn't quite as dominant against guys with solid swim moves and or hand fighters. So that is something of concern going to the NFL level, how he's going to handle that with more guys that have a more toolsy set. I think it's kind of not a negative. For anyone else, it wouldn't have been a negative. For Dickerson, it is because he's just so highly sought after. He is adequate. I thought he did a fine job. It just he wasn't as dominant compared to other players that I saw him go against. Then, unfortunately, my biggest disappointment was in his short yardage blocking. In goal line and quarterback situations, he failed to get a good push in those for whatever reason. He has the strength, and he showed to be a guy that can move people. I don't know why in short yardage he kind of has that struggle where he wasn't really getting much of a push. I was pretty disappointed with that, especially considering that the Steelers really struggled in short yardage situations in the past year. He's inconsistent as a move blocker. Again, I expect him to be great every play with move blocks, seeing how in other situations, once he got speed, he was excellent, but he wasn't always good with his hand placement. Excuse me, in those scenarios. I thought that his hand placement kind of held him back when he was moving, wasn't able to kind of secure his hands in the right spot, and made him not as good as a move blocker compared to other blocks. So that is something to keep in mind. So overall, the question is going to be entirely about his health. Dickerson is a really good player with not much wrong to his game. A lot of the problems I did see are more than coachable. But after coming off another injury for a guy that was playing with 2 braces on his knees, can you trust it? That's the question. I think it tanks. I'm sorry, not tanks. Well, tanks is workable here too, but it takes his value. Which, if he went his last 2 years with Alabama completely uninjured, I am 90% sure he's a first rounder. But it takes that value and pushes it all the way to the mid to late second round, with the possibility to even fall into the third. I wouldn't be surprised if the injuries have him completely off a team's draft board, because there's a lot of risk involved here, especially with him not being able to test at his pro day. He's not personally off my draft board, though, because what he showed when healthy is too good. But I'm not a fan of him at 24. I think that's a little bit too high risk. I think that in other situations he might be good. I think he's a more in play for 55, if I'm being honest with you. Anyhow, to gather my opinion on him, I watched his highlights. I watched the Alabama offensive line versus South Carolina in 2019, where he got a right guard start. And then I watched offensive line versus Auburn in 2020, versus Missouri in 2020, and versus Kentucky in 2020. Speaking of Kentucky, my next prospect is Drake Jackson. He's a center from Kentucky. He is 6'2" and 293 pounds. He was a 2-time All-State pick in the state of Kentucky, coming out of high school, and was considered a 4-star recruit. He received offers from Alabama, Ohio State, and Florida, but he knew he wanted to play for his home state and enrolled early at Kentucky. How different it would have been. It would have been interesting if he actually chose Alabama and ended up as their starting center instead of Landon Dickerson for the stretch. I mean, he got there early, but what could have been? Interesting. He redshirted his freshman season, but was able to start Kentucky's last 7 games in the 2017 season. In 2018, he started all 13 games at center and helped Steelers' current starting running back, Benny Snell, rush and become Kentucky's all-time leading rusher, and helped him become the first player in school history to rush for 1,000 yards in 3 straight seasons. Just an asterisk on that. Jackson was only there for the last 2, but I mean, he still helped him get the last 2. And regardless, Kentucky up until Benny Snell had never had a guy rush for 1,000 yards in 2 separate seasons, so he helped that extend to 3 with Benny Snell. Even without Benny Snell, in 2019, he was able to start all the team's games and again helped the team have impressive rushing stats. In 2020, he was named second-team All-SEC, only behind Dickerson for starting all 11 games. Following his redshirt senior season, he declared for the draft. So what's good about him is his great snap-to-block speed. I was very happy with how fast he got his hands up after he was snapping the ball. And it gave him good recognition and great blitz pickup. He was really quick to understand what was happening, and I felt like he was really, really good at picking up blitzes. On the tape that I watched, I didn't really see him give up anything against the blitz. I thought that he handled it almost perfectly. Then he's a run-blocking specialist, which is really good for the Steelers. With Kentucky setting tons of rushing records during his career. As I talked about, I mean, Kentucky had never had a guy rush for 1,000 yards in 2 straight seasons, and then they had Benny Snell who did it for 3, and Drake Jackson was a center for 2 of that. So he did really well, and even then, I was happy watching. Kentucky was surprisingly fun to watch as a rushing team. Their offense sucked as a whole last year, kind of because they just weren't able to get it together passing, but watching them rush was pretty fun, because their offensive line is actually pretty solid and probably led by Drake Jackson. Then he has solid mirroring abilities. I thought he had good movement to counter guys that are trying to move around him. Then he's adequate recovery speed if he overextends on the block. He didn't really overextend too much, but I really liked the few times I saw him overextend, which is obviously a bad thing. I liked his ability to get back. The few times he overextended, he didn't lose on the play. Like, it wasn't over because he overextended. He was able to get back in position and keep a good block up, and I really, really liked that. Uh, then he did good in space against Alabama. I really thought that he was handling a very tough team really well, and I thought that getting out in front, he was a good blocker in that regard against, again, some pretty tough guys. I mean, like Dylan Moses, John said isn't the smartest. We know that, but like he's still a guy that's expected to be drafted, and I mean they have tons of talent all over Alabama. Then he has adequate grip strength. I thought he did pretty well sustaining blocks. I mean, I think he held on for very long. Not as experienced in pass blocking as he would be run blocking, because, again, Kentucky is a rush-first team. But I thought that he did good in both regards. Then he blocked the hell out of Monty Rice, who I was a fan of. Monty Rice is a inside linebacker from Georgia. I thought he did really well. On the negative side of things, he was a little too slow as a puller for the running back he had. He wasn't really able to get out in front, and that showed up multiple times on tape. So speed could be something he worked on. Foot quickness probably a little bit too. That's a little bit tough. It's tough as a puller to not be able to get in front of his guys. Then he is undersized for NFL lineman standards. At under 300 pounds, at 293 and only 6'2", he would need to bulk up to be a starting center, really. I mean, it's pretty undersized, to be honest. Then he has T-Rex arms. His arms are really, really short. His arms are only at 31, I think, 31 inches. 31 inches compared to, like, the other guys I looked at. I think the other guys, the minimum was 33. So he's 2 inches below that. And so he's got little T-Rex arms going on, like A.Q. Shipley did. Then he got pushed back a few times against Alabama. They have guys like Barrymore and stuff like that, so it's kind of expected. Alabama is some big competition. And it wasn't all the time. He wasn't getting destroyed in Alabama. I want to make that clear. He just got pushed back a few times, and it wasn't really super dangerous. It worked in college, but he has to keep two hands on guys. It was kind of interesting because in some games, he's able to stiff arm guys with one arm as he was moving. But again, he needs to use both hands. Like, I don't really... when I say that, you would think, like, wow, that's really cool. He was able to get guys with one arm, but, like, there's really no reason for it, if you know what I'm saying. Like, he was just kind of doing it, and I guess because it worked fine, he was keeping his other arm open, but guys at the NFL level are going to bully you if you try to put one arm on them. They're going to absolutely destroy that. I was... Because, like, Kentucky is in the SEC, right? So, like, they play pretty tough competition. I watched the game against Alabama, and I watched the game against Georgia. I was surprised that worked as often as it did, and it came up more than once. So, regardless, he needs to work on using both hands for the next level. Then he stops driving his feet when blocking at times. He would be completely still, honestly, and so he needs to work on keep driving with his feet. I think feet quickness is something he should work on, really. Apart from gaining weight, foot agility and foot quickness is something he should work on. He should work with, like, see, I know they have it for tight ends. I'm sure they have one for offensive linemen. Like, there's a footwork god, in quotations, for tight ends to work on. Like, with Eric Ebron, just saw him again this offseason to work on his footwork. If he could meet with a guy like that, I think it would really help him in several regards. I think it could make him a little bit faster. I think it could help with him driving. I think it would be good for him. Then I think I said on the last episode, I don't really point out one-time things, but he had one snap go a little high on tape, and I just wanted to point that out, that on tape there, because the reason I point this out is that there could be something that I missed. I didn't get to obviously watch every game of Drake Jackson's, but there could have been another game where this happened. But he did have a snap that went a little high on tape, and it ended up almost in a fumble. Their quarterback dropped it, but was able to land on it, and it ended up in a sack. So, no bueno on that. Overall, Jackson's guy has been mocked as going somewhere between rounds 4 and 6. And in the first mock draft I did, I drafted him in the 4th, and honestly, it wouldn't be terrible. I give him a late 4th to early 5th round grade. I think he's undersized, but he could bulk up in the offseason. And regardless of that, I thought he stood up against some pretty strong competition like Georgia and Alabama. So I'm not really as worried about how he can handle stronger and bigger competition as an undersized guy. If Steelers miss out on early option centers, Jackson could totally be an option, in my opinion. So to develop my opinion, I watched the offensive line versus Georgia in 2020. I watched the offensive line versus Alabama in 2020. And then I watched the offensive line versus North Carolina State defense in 2020. My next prospect is going to be Kendrick Green. He's a guard from Illinois. He's 6'2" and 305 pounds. He grew up in Illinois and had helped his high school team win the state championship as a senior, but on the defensive side of the ball as a defensive tackle, earning himself all-state first-team honors. He was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, being ranked the 32nd best defensive tackle in the class and 8th best player in Illinois. He got offers from Notre Dame, Minnesota, and Ole Miss, but decided to commit to Illinois because of the coaching staff and wanted to represent his home. Surprising decision. So, I would have 100% went to Notre Dame. I don't know if he didn't trust himself to be able to start, but Notre Dame, if as far as I remember, is in the state of Illinois. I'm pretty sure it's like right outside of Chicago, if not in Chicago. But so please yell at me in the comments if I'm wrong. I'm like fairly confident on that though. But regardless, he committed to Illinois. He redshirted in 2017 and switched from defensive tackle to offensive guard while putting on 30 pounds to be able to handle guard duties. And in 2018, he started all 12 games at, he started all 12 games at left guard. In 2019, he started all 13 games with 12 at left guard and one at center after an injury knocked their starter out. In 2020, he was a first-team pick after starting a total of 8 games with 3 at center and 5 at left guard. Following his junior season, he declared for the draft. So, what's good about him is he did well as an impromptu center in 2019 and showed tons of improvement as a center in 2020. He was the guy I was talking about that was in 2019 looking back at his guy to be like, all right, I got to get the snap perfect. I didn't blame him for that. Kendrick Green is a guard. He's guard first and center second. So, like, for Dickerson doing that as a guard, that's why it was a bad thing. But he was doing it as a center that was thrown into there like, sorry, my guy, you have to go to center now, and it's not your natural position. But Green stepped up in 2020, and you saw him improve as a center, and he didn't do that in 2020. When he started as a center, he didn't look back. So, I thought that was good. He is a scary athlete with bizarre and unique performances in the vert and broad jumps, the 40-yard dash, and both splits. He scored a relative athletic score of 9.83 or better in all of those things. That is very, very rare. I don't know if it's really how it works, but I'm pretty sure that means he's a 98.3 percentile of all guards to ever participate, which is insane. And that's at the bottom. I think one was at 9, 2 were at 10. I forget which ones were at complete 10. Like, it was the rarest thing that you could see from a guard. And then one was at like 9.98, and the other was just a little bit above 9.83. So, overall, very freaky athlete for a guard. That is that you want to develop that. That's kind of like, you drool over that. You think, wow, what that could really be. Then he's good on double team blocks. The effort is there. I liked what I saw there. It's kind of hard to be bad at double team blocks, but every year I somehow find one offensive lineman prospect that isn't, and that didn't change this year. Then effort is there to get out in front. You see the speed on film. That wasn't an inflated pro day number. You see that he's actually really fast, like for a guy his size. I thought I liked what I saw from him. So what's not good about him is he has well below average height and weight for an NFL guard. I mean, he stands at 6'2" and 305 pounds. The weight isn't terrible. Really, neither of those are terrible. They're just kind of slightly below average. Then he got bent backwards a bit from stronger competition. I worry about his strength a little bit going into the NFL. Again, this is why you go to Notre Dame and not Illinois. I would have loved to see him against the rest of the ACC, like Clemson and stuff, and see how he handled that. But, I mean, I worry about stronger competition because his level of competition wasn't the craziest. It could have been better. That then he could deal with some more strength overall. Like I said, just needs to be stronger. I felt like I think he skipped out on the bench. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure he did. He skipped out on the bench, and I could see why on tape. He could do with a little bit more strength, probably in his base too. I mostly in his arms, I think, but a little bit of a stronger base as well. Then he almost gets no drive in blocks unless he was able to put speed into it. Again, this is why he should add strength to his base too, because he's just not really driving people, unless he's running into them with his. Because I want to go back to his positives for a second. He could turn speed into power. Sort of like Dickerson. Dickerson was able to turn speed into power as well, and with Kendrick Green such high speed, he has a lot of speed to turn into power. But that's the only way he could drive people, was if he was doing that, if he got a little bit of speed into it. Then I felt like he ended up on the ground way too much. You could say that he plays with a little bit too forward lean, but I really didn't think he leaned forward too much. I don't think that's the reason why he fell. I think he was just had inconsistent with hand placement and stuff sometimes. Just kind of fell on his own a lot. Then he's slow to react to blitz pickup. He's a little bit raw in that regard. His recognition isn't the greatest. I thought that it could be better for a guy that is actually pretty fast and should be able to make it over fast to make up for it, but just not fast enough. Then not very good on blocking on the next level with bad angles and bad hand placement. Just probably the worst today that I saw of blocking on the next level. I don't know. It's close. I'll get back to it when I go over my prospects, but just wasn't very good in that regard. He just kind of missed blocks. It's not that he couldn't block on the next level, but it's just it was the amount of times that he missed the block and just didn't get there when he was on the next level. He's just kind of useless there. It almost makes more sense just staying where he is and blocking. But then he has short arms if you wanted to play center. Typically, if you have shorter arms, you're stuck at guard. But I mean, Drake Jackson has shorter arms than him, and Drake Jackson is projected to be a center. So, I mean, the arms aren't that short. I mean, it's just something that's might turn teams away from wanting to play him at center. So anyhow, overall, Green has been mocked mostly in the 4th and 5th rounds, with a few outliers in both the 3rd and 6th rounds. Personally, I give him a 6th round grade. I think he needs a lot of work. He's very raw and needs to be coached up. His height is also going to be a turnoff. Excuse me. And he will need to add some mass to make it as an NFL guard. That being said, his ceiling is very appealing. With how athletic he is, he could be a great pull and lead blocker after being coached up, and the positional versatility where he could possibly play some center in a pinch will also be appealing as well. But I think before the 6th is just too high. Maybe late 5th? I think maybe late 5th wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but I'm just not sold. If he was a little taller, I'd agree on 5th or even 4th. Like if he's 6'4", I think I'd be definitely hard 5th. But it's just at 6'2" and undersized in the weight department. I'm thinking he's a 6th round pick. So I won't lie, I didn't get to watch the most tape on him. I watched his 2020 highlights, which were almost useless. I watched the Illinois offensive line versus Northwestern defense in 2020, where he played both guard and center. And then I had to get creative again. I forget who I did it for, where I watched... I think I did it for Tyree Gillespie. But to watch more tape of him, I watched Brandon Peters versus Cal in 2019, where he played at center. That means I only got to see his pass blocking snaps there, so that was tough. But I feel like I felt like I knew Kendrick Green after this. I felt like that was surprisingly enough, which usually it isn't. So that brings me to my next prospect, which is Trey Hill. He's a center. He is from Georgia, and he is 6'3" and 319 pounds. Deandre Hill, going by Trey, was both a guard and tackle recruit coming out of Georgia that was considered a 4-star recruit. He was a 3rd-ranked guard in the state of Georgia, and he received offers from the likes of Michigan State, FSU, Georgia, and Auburn. And although it appeared as though he would be heading to Auburn, Georgia was able to bring him in on a late push. As a true freshman, he played in all 14 games, got 4 starts to end the year at the right guard position. As a sophomore, he transitioned to center and started all 14 games there. In 2020, he played the first 8 games, but was playing through pain and shut his season down early to repair torn menisci, which I did not know the plural of meniscus was menisci until today. Fun fact. Well, not today when I wrote that down, but he had to repair both of them in his knees. Still, following his true junior season, he declared for the draft. So, what's going to be good about him is that stuff I already just went over. He's experienced a guard early in his career, and he's tough and played through pain. He's got positional versatility that if you needed him to play guard, he could likely play guard in a pinch if you needed. And again, tough. He played through 2 torn menisci in his knees. That's not easy with both. Kind of surprised that he tore both and just didn't stop. But I mean, to each their own. I guess he probably figured he was going to be playing. He probably knew he wanted to come out after this season, so he wanted to get as much on tape as he could. But could have hurt himself that way. But still, I'm giving it as a positive that he's tough. Then what's good about him is he immediately finds work. There's no thinking about it. He is going to block you, and he's going to find someone to block. And it's just, and it's not that he's bad at blitz pickup, because I actually have that as a positive. He's good at blitz pickup. He's just really good at, he wants to hit someone. He wants to get his hands on someone and push them and get them out of the way and be a good blocker. And he could still be a good blitz picker-upper. I'm making that a word. He's a blitz picker-upper. And at the same time, he's good recognition. I thought he was adequate on the second level. I thought he did. I guess you could say it's inconsistent. When I say adequate, I mean I think that they have decent enough abilities where they're going to be okay at the NFL level. It means that they showed some good things, they showed some bad things, but overall, I think adequate is just the best way. I think he can handle it. Then he had accurate snaps. I didn't see a bad snap from him. Then he was good on double team blocks. Again, it's really hard to not be good on double team blocks, but some people aren't for whatever reason. Then he has fairly long arms for a center. He has longer arms than both Dickerson and Jackson. And I already went over the guys that Dickerson had longer arms than. So that is good for development. I mean, you want a guy with longer arms. Then he has pretty solid pass blocker with decent sustain abilities. I thought that his sustain was more than adequate, decent, and did well overall. Then I thought he had a really good showing in short yardage situations, which was nice. I think that short yardage is important for the Steelers, especially after last year, and I thought that he was really good in those kind of situations. So going to the negative side of things, he plays with way too much forward lean. Now here's an asterisk I'm putting there. It might have been a Georgia thing, because it felt like every single offensive lineman on Georgia played with too much forward lean. And I think it might have been a coaching thing where they did it because they're also kind of bizarre blockers. The only other team that I kind of saw do this at times, and it made me laugh when I saw it, was Auburn. But they'll have Georgia guys just dive at people's shins, at even on the offensive line, and that's what they did. And that might be why they play with that much forward lean. But I don't like that. I think that has to be uncoached if that is really if that was a Georgia thing and not just a Trey Hill thing. And I don't know if maybe it's just Georgia has got guys that play with too much forward lean. I'm not sure. I am keeping it in the negatives though because it has to be uncoached. Then he has very bad hand placement. He blocked a lot with his shoulder, and it's just not going to work at the NFL level. He's going to be thrown to the ground by guys with swim moves and stuff like that, and he's got to get better hand placement. It's what he's got to work on the most going to the next level. He struggled against bull rushers, mostly ones that could turn speed into power, like in the Mississippi State game. I thought he had a really, really tough time, and I'm pretty sure I'm looking at the prospect. Fun fact. I mean, that's 2 episodes ahead, but I already have my prospects picked. Oh, no, I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm confusing which prospects I'm doing. I'm looking at the guy Spencer, who was a 4.3 defensive end for Mississippi State, but the reason I'm confusing him is because he weighs 301 pounds like he's a DT. But it could have been the guy that I was watching. I don't really know who they're going up against when I'm watching them. But regardless, he really struggled in that Mississippi State game where the bull rushers that turned speed into power pushed him right back. Now, strength is this is where I was really scared. His strength is a huge question, with only 17 on the bench press and looking like he doesn't have the strongest base. That 17 on the bench press is very, very bad. Like, rarely uniquely bad. It is bottom. It's under the bottom 10% of centers coming out, and he's just really. That being said, just an overall bad athlete. He received a relative athletic score of just 2.02, with the bench and 3-cone being below a 0.9 in relative athletic score, meaning it is in the under the 9th percentile of centers. That is really, really bad. He struggled a lot with bigger competition. That being said, I mean, it's tough for him with a guy with not that much strength. I think he's out of shape. Like, at 319 pounds, I don't think he has enough muscle. I think he's got too much fat. So that is something of concern. I mean, you don't put up 17 on the bench press at 319 pounds unless something's wrong there. So overall, the mocks for Hill are all over the place, with him going as high as the 3rd round or falling as low as into the 7th, and a bunch of mocks at all the rounds in between. Personally, I give him an early 6th round grade. As I kept watching the tape, it just got worse and worse somehow, where I started thinking like he was a late 4th rounder to early 5th, but ended up in the 6th round. I was honestly going to say 7th. I had gotten all the way to the 7th, but in my mind, I'm factoring in that he played through pain, and he could be better without playing through injuries to his knees that required surgery. It's tough. I mean, like, he played injured in knees. His legs are important as an offensive lineman. I mean, in any sport, your legs are important. So that's kind of dumb to say, but I think that made me. I was like, all right, I think I could give him a higher grade than the 7th round, because I think that I could take the risk and say he might be better. And then also, I also took into account that it might have been George's fault for his forward lean, so I felt like that was enough to bump him up to a 6th round grade. But still, though, who knows how much would change without the injuries. I still think he has potential to be worth a 6th round pick, though. So to get my opinion on him, I watched his highlights. I watched versus Auburn in 2020. I watched versus Mississippi State in 2020, and I watched versus Kentucky in 2020. That brings me to I'm already at my last prospect. I'm flying today. I had 5 prospects. I'm flying today. That brings me to Wyatt Davis, the guard from Ohio State. He is 6'4" and 315 pounds. And Davis has NFL bloodlines, with his grandfather, Willie Davis, in the Hall of Fame as a Packers defensive lineman. Davis was dominating his competition in high school in California, as you'd expect from a 6'3", 319-pound high schooler, but it definitely got him noticed. He was a 4-star recruit and had offers from 24 different college teams come his senior season, including from Notre Dame, LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, and more. As I said, 24. However, he chose Ohio State. He redshirted in the 2017 season and was able to crack the starting lineup late in 2018. After playing in the first 12 games of the season, he was able to start the final 2 games at right guard. In 2019, he started all 15 games for Ohio State at the right guard spot and earned first-team All-Big Ten recognition, as well as first-team Associated Press All-American. Davis was originally going to opt out of the 2020 season, but when the Big Ten announced it would play in the fall, he came back and cemented himself as one of the best guards in the nation. He started 8 times at the right guard spot and once again earned first-team Associated Press All-American and All-Conference honors. With nothing left to prove, he declared for the draft. So what's good about him is he's an excellent move blocker. I mean, when I say excellent, I'm not holding back on that. His move blocking was really, really good, and I was really, really impressed. It was such an interesting thing to be good at. It was very specific, but I mean, he is one of the best. I keep saying this for guys, and I just I forget about some of the other guys I looked at, but I'm pretty sure he's a top 2 move blocker, and I don't think he's 2. I think he's the best move blocker I ever looked at. He has good grip strength. His sustainability on blocks was solid. His ability to move guys out of the way, I thought that he was really good in that department. He keeps his feet moving. I think he was the only one out of my other guys that really consistently kept his feet moving as a blocker. He was a guy that wasn't going to stop and kept driving, and I think that's good. Plays with a strong base. Then he takes good angles and makes good blocks on the second level. when he gets there, I thought that he was decent in that regard, especially really up the middle. I'll say, he's good at taking the angles up the middle and good blocks on the second level there. Then he is good at twist pickup and good on handoff blocks. I was very impressed with his ability on handoff blocks. I'm sorry, twist pickup. Handoff blocks were okay. I think they were decent, but he was really good on twist pickups when guys were twisting around and stuff like that. He has great blitz recognition. I mean, he has to get into a negative for a second. He has bad lateral movement, but his blitz recognition kind of made up for it at times, so that was really good. Then he was great in short yardage situation. I thought he got a good push, and I thought that he did really well. And another positive for him is Justin Fields held on the ball forever sometimes. It really felt like that. Watching Justin Fields was interesting. I mean, I wasn't really paying attention fully to him, but I mean, I'd be like watching Davis, and Davis would be on his guy for like 5 seconds. I'm like, what is Justin Fields doing? And again, with his grip strength, he did well with block sustain. I think that was really good for me to see from Wyatt Davis that he could sustain blocks for like that long. Kind of redundant to say, but he's strong as hell. He is really, really strong. He did really well in all regards that required strength. Then I thought he had good snap to block speed. I thought he did well in that regard. As a guard, it's kind of more time thing because you're not the one snapping the ball, so you don't know. You have to have the cadence in your head. And I liked his snap to block speed. Now, what's negative about him is he is painfully slow in pace in space. I mean, painfully. He's just, if he ran the 40-yard dash, it wouldn't have been good. He didn't participate, at least as far as I know, in his pro day. It's just not very fast. Very, very slow. He has no chance as a lead blocker at the NFL level and didn't pull at all on tape. He might have pulled like once and it was like maybe, it wasn't like a full pull. It wasn't going to the other side of the field. It was just moving over to like the left side of the center at the most. Like that was it. And this is likely due to his speed. It limits his versatility as a guard. I mean, when you think of offensive line versatility, you're usually thinking, okay, maybe they can play multiple positions. His versatility as a guard is limited. Like he can't pull. It just is what it is. Like he's gonna be way too slow to pull at the NFL level. And that's tough. Like that is really tough. And he just looks sluggish out there. He looks kind of slow. He looks like he's moving like labored. It's just overall very, very slow. Then I already mentioned it, but he has below average lateral movement abilities. He had the good blitz recognition to kind of make up for it, but the lateral movement was also slow as well. Now this was something that was really interesting to me. I was watching the Penn State game, right? I watched both Penn State games in 2019 and 2020. The 2021, a true freshman defensive tackle at Penn State gave him trouble and even beat him for a sack. That was like the worst I had ever seen. It was the worst I saw from him. I was very upset with that, seeing that, because I looked sometimes when a guy gets beat bad, like I like to see who they were up against because I don't really know college football, so I looked it up and I was like, oh wow, he's a true freshman, and that's tough. And who knows? Maybe this true freshman in 3 years is going to be the best defensive tackle coming out at the NFL level. For the NFL draft. So, but at this point in the game, right, a true freshman should not have, with Wyatt Davis' experience and how good he's considered, the experience should beat out how good this guy is, even just raw talent, because he just doesn't have that much experience. You know what I'm saying? So I was unhappy with that. That when I saw he was a true freshman, I was like, ugh, that kind of hurts. That being said, I'm worried about how well he could handle bigger competition. As experience should have had that true freshman beat out, and he was a big guy. The true freshman was a big guy, so I give him that. But that gives me concerns for the next level when in the NFL they just get bigger and stronger. Then he was inconsistent at finding work. He definitely could be faster in that regard, like the mental processing of let me find someone to block here. I felt like more than my other offensive linemen, he did a lot more standing around, just like, okay, I'm going to stay here. And this is 100%, like, this wasn't like, okay, let me sit here and wait to see if there's blitz pickup. This was, sluggish, kind of maybe lazy. Like I'm just gonna sit here and stuff. Like that's what it felt like. It was just really that's kind of how it felt. He was very labored in trying to help someone or find a block. He could help. This is the guy. He could help out his teammates more on double team blocks. He is the one guy that has something wrong with his double team blocks. It's incredible. Every year there's one guy that this should not be anything that's ever bad, but it is, and he just wasn't a guy to find work immediately and wasn't as helpful. Then he doesn't consistently make first contact, despite having the longest arms of anyone I looked at today. I found that annoying. like guys like Drake Jackson are putting in high effort, high motor, getting their hands on, trying their best, and he has 31-inch arms. And Wyatt Davis was out here like not being able to get his arms up fast enough to make first contact, even though he has longer arms. Painful. It was painful. He's relying. What this is telling me about Davis is he's a low effort player that is relying solely on his strength, basically. So overall, he's bizarre because what he does well, he does really well. Like the move blocking, NFL ready well. And his strength, NFL ready. But he is really limited because of his athleticism and speed. He also just failed the eye test a few times where there wasn't a negative to point out overall. Like, I couldn't write it as, like, a negative, like, this is something I saw a few times on tape, but I just wasn't a fan of how he played. That being said, I give Davis a second-round grade. No mock drafts have him making it past the first, but I just can't justify a first-round grade with him having problems that I'm not sure are coachable, like the athleticism. I think the effort could be coached, but the athleticism you can't really fix. Again, it's just a guy that might be able to work with a footwork guy, but anyhow. I watched his highlights. I watched the offensive line versus Nebraska in 2020. I watched the offensive line versus Penn State in 2020. I watched the offensive line versus Indiana in 2020, and I watched him versus Penn State in 2019. So that brings me to ranking my prospects, and I'm going to start from the bottom. I'm pretty bad at hiding it sometimes when I just don't like a guy. I'm good at hiding when I like a guy, I feel like. Maybe you could tell me in the comments. You could tell that too, but really bad at hiding when I don't like someone, and that's Wyatt Davis. The first game I watched was Penn State in 2019. I thought I was in for a treat. I really did. I thought that this guy was going to be really fun to watch. I thought he was going to be really good because his 2019 tape seemed really solid, but what I like to do is if I'm watching a guy from 2019, I try to find the same team if they have it. So I went from Penn State 2019 immediately to Penn State 2020, and it was all over. And it never really got better with tons of problems on tape. Along with the Steelers not really needing a guard as high as Davis is going, I rank him last. If he does end up late in the second round, I wouldn't be mad about that, but I doubt that. I mean, there's times where I've been right, where it's like, okay, a guy is going to fall, and he falls, but there's been times where I've said, this guy shouldn't be drafted until this, and then he gets taken 2 rounds later. And I mean, the consensus seems to be fair on Davis that he is like the best guard in this draft, which that is sad. That's a very sad thing to see. But I mean, with tons of teams needing offensive linemen, I'm probably wrong here, but I give him a second round grade. Doesn't mean he's going to get drafted there. I just wouldn't touch him until the second round, personally. After Wyatt Davis, the fourth guy is going to be Kendrick Green. Unfortunately, both the guards are bottom 2. Green is way too small, way too raw, and too small to be going where he's projected to go. As a 6th round pick, I wouldn't be mad at all. He's a good developmental guy, and I think 6th round is good. I wouldn't be mad at that. Before that, especially with the Steelers not having a 5th as of now, I just don't like how raw he is. I mean, if the Steelers get a 5th, him going in the 5th isn't terrible either. I wouldn't hate it, wouldn't love it, but a 4th round pick is way too high. And he's projected like 3rd, 4th, sometimes late 3rd, mostly 4th, and then around the 5th sometimes, but I just can't. I can't justify that with what I saw. 3rd is Trey Hill. I think Hill could be better than I saw with him playing through 2 torn menisci at the same time, and I admire that toughness. Still, though, I can only really go from the tape, and it was only adequate. I would feel a little worried if he was the only center we left the draft with, but with some guard experience, it wouldn't be a bad depth piece, I suppose, if he falls into the 6th round, but that strength scared me. That strength scared the heck out of me to rank him 3rd, but, I mean, the Steelers, if it comes down to picking Trey Hill, the Steelers are in trouble. I think that they need a center at some point. So you might have to grasp at straws and hope. But also, again, it would be interesting because teams don't typically go for centers, but the Steelers could double dip theoretically at center. I mean, you get a guy early, and then you get Trey Hill, who's probably better than J.C. Hassenauer as a developmental guy, and could play center and guard. Wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I think the Steelers have a lot of positions to address, so I don't know if they have the ability to do that, but it's something that is possible. Number 2, and let me preface this. This was so tough. I feel like I say that a lot, but when I said this was tough to rank the last two in Landon Dickerson and Drake Jackson, it was tough. I was sitting there going back and forth, like, how do I want to rank these guys? Because there's significant value with Drake Jackson, but Landon Dickerson's tape was amazing. It was just, so it was tough to call with Dickerson's injuries. That being said, at number 2 comes in Drake Jackson. It was tough. And I will preface this with, if the Steelers don't land Dickerson, Jackson would be a fantastic value option later that I think will be a starter. He's undersized right now with short arms, but he handled tougher competition really well. I mean, I watched his games against Alabama and Georgia, and I thought he was really, really well in those games. But regardless, I think if he bulks up, he's going to be an excellent pick for a team, and he might already be working on bulking up. And with the value he has, he was really close to taking first for me. I think that he can be a serviceable player. I feel like he's going to be a Baltimore Raven, and that's going to piss me off because the Ravens kind of need a center, and he's a good run blocking center. I feel like, so it's going to piss me off if he really does end up with the Ravens, but it is what it is, and that leaves Dickerson for first. High risk, high reward. It's a game that I sometimes like to play. It's the name of the game here. If Dickerson doesn't get hurt as much as he did through his college career, we are likely talking about Dickerson like we were Quentin Nelson a few years ago, where despite him not playing a very high-value position, like guard isn't a high-value position. It's not very often that a guard goes top 5, but he would, going back to Dickerson, he would likely go top 10 because he's future All-Pro written all over him. Watching him play his competition, he was just better than everyone else. By far. It's literally insane. His tape was just another level of watching a guy destroy guys, and it was another level. It was watching like a All-Pro, and it was like Quentin Nelson's tape when he was in Notre Dame. That being said, I think with the level, the injuries are very concerning, but from the level of play he showed, he's going to be worth it, but not at 24. That's too big of a risk. I'm looking at Dickerson as an option at 55, a second-round trade-up scenario, or a first-round trade-down scenario. With the Steelers slated to get a third-round comp pick next year, I think they'll have the ammo to move up in the second round if they want to. I think he will be there. It's a tough call, though. If it came down to him or Najee at 24... I am picking Dickerson every time and twice on Sundays. That's just how it is. Taking a first round running back would be ridiculous, and I mean, everyone's got to be prepared for it. It's going to happen. I'm saying it right now, and I'm mad about it, but I'm prepared. I'm prepared for the first round running back. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna sting, but I would prefer Dickerson over Najee Harris at 24, if it comes down to it, personally. That being said, that should. Oh no. We have some big NFL news that has to do with the AFC North and kind of the AFC. So, for a while, Orlando Brown has requested a trade from the Ravens. He wanted to play left tackle, and the Ravens said, we got Ronnie Stanley, you're staying at right tackle, or you're not staying here. And he said, bet, get me out of here. And that being said, people are saying the Ravens lost this trade, but Orlando Brown has been traded to the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Ravens gave up Orlando Brown, a 2021 second, and a 2022 sixth to the Chiefs for pick 31 in this year's draft. So they traded up basically from pick 27 in the second round to pick 31. Then they got a 2021 third, a 2021 fourth, and a 2022 fifth. So they got traded up in next year from the 6th to the 5th, which with how the Chiefs are slated to be, that's it's basically a full round trade up. So that is good for them. So people said the Ravens lost this trade, but I don't really think so. I mean, the Ravens are in good position to get Tevin Jenkins. They're in good position to get an inside wide receiver right there because there's a bunch of good ones in this draft. They have the ammo to trade up if they wanted to. I mean, that 2021 third and fourth, like, that's pretty good. That's pretty solid. And they also have, they should be getting comp picks for Matthew Judon and Yannick Ngakoue following this year. I think 4th and 5th for each of those guys, or maybe 2 fourths. So, like, they have the ammo to trade up if they want to for not very expensive of a price. And that's just if they want to do that. I don't know. I like the Ravens moving up from the 2nd to the 1st round. That's a big jump. That's a pick of that's like a jump of almost I think it's 25 picks, a little bit over that. But regardless, I wanted to talk about that bit of NFL news, but that should actually wrap up today's episode. So you've been listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast, season 6, episode 11. If you enjoyed this content, watch our other prospect previews. We have a bunch of them. We're doing them for every position. And with the interior offensive line done now, we only got 2 left, and that's edge and defensive tackle. And then I might come back for one more. I know I said I was only going to do one Mod Podge episode, but I might come back with a few more prospects. I got a few more guys I really want to look at, and if I have time, I will. That being said, if you want to check us out on social media, check the description below. Everybody, have a good night, and go Steelers.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.